Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. With your host, Dr. Drumm McNaughton, CEO of The Change Leader, a consultancy that helps higher ed leaders holistically transform their institutions. Learn more at changinghighered.com. And now, here's your host, Drumm McNaughton.
Thank you, David. My guest today is Peter Murphy-Lewis, CNN political analyst, filmmaker, and director of People Worth Caring About. Peter doesn't just tell stories, he lives them. His work bridges cultures, industries, and human experiences, and he's guided rock stars such as Steven Tyler and Paul McCartney through Chile, or hosted multiple television documentary series on television networks. So you may ask, why is Peter on a higher ed podcast whose audience is primarily university and college presidents, board members, senior executives, and mid-level managers? Peter has a profound understanding of the human connection. He crafts narratives that inform, inspire, and challenge audiences to see the world differently. His mission is clear. He brings meaningful stories to life. How is that applicable to higher ed? Well, think about your enrollment funnel. What you're doing is creating a connection with your students, or think about the folks that you're marketing to. His mission's clear. He brings these meaningful stories to life. And he joins me today to talk about how higher ed leaders can reclaim their narrative in a noisy, politicized space, and how higher ed institutions can turn students and faculty into authentic advocates. Peter, welcome to the show.
I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you on the show. You've got quite an incredible background doing documentaries, working in South America. You know, you've worked with folks like Steven Tyler and Paul McCartney. Of course, nobody knows who they are, of course. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the cause of higher education.
Yeah, the shortened version, and then you can interrupt or ask me to elaborate. The shortened version is I thought I was going to be an academic or a diplomat all of my life. So I went and studied my master's in South America with a Rotary scholarship, studied my PhD all the way to the dissertation, and I got into entrepreneurship. And I kept one foot in upper education as a full-time professor in South America at the University of Chile on U.S. foreign policy, and then one foot in entrepreneurism. And I started to build up my marketing experience, and I just couldn't balance both, and moved over to entrepreneurship and ran a travel company and built a couple different brands, sold those companies in the last 2 years, and then got into the documentary space, which is kind of between education and marketing in a way, right? It's kind of educating and teaching and marketing in one way or another. I've never thought about that. So that's kind of my abbreviated version to understand where I am now.
That's fascinating. I, too, have never really thought about documentaries as educating, but that's in fact what they're doing. They're bringing a particular situation to light in a medium where people, like to watch.
It's true. It's true. If you think about both the negative documentaries, Michael Moore from 20 years ago, or you think about the positive ones like My Octopus Teacher, My Octopus Professor, or Ken Burns around country music, or Ken Burns around Vietnam.
Or baseball.
Yeah, or baseball. That we sit down to learn something new, and it's mixing education and entertainment together is what a documentary is going for.
And the best documentaries do just that. They make a story. They bring something to light in a way that's tellable. It's not always easy to see it, but in fact, it brings to light a particular issue in a way that people can understand.
Mm-hmm. I don't have this perfectly polished, but after doing documentaries in the healthcare space for the last year and a half, I've come to kind of a hypothesis that the further the gap between what true reality is, what's authentic, what is legit, what it is, and what everyone thinks, the bigger that gap, the better the documentary. And I believe it is because the average human, you and I, we are full of contradictions. I'm a dad. Sometimes I say one thing to my son and the next day, maybe I think differently, or the way that I talk to someone. It's not black and white in the real world. So when we come into a documentary, I think that resonates with us. It doesn't come off as polished as a movie because we don't look like the people in the movies. We look much more closely to the people in the documentaries.
Great point. Let's bring this around to higher education, because higher ed is going through all sorts of interesting things. As when we talked last week, it's not a problem with value of higher education. It's a problem with perception.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there is a huge gap there, right? Like, I was born in 1980. My parents didn't go to college. I can remember probably the most important thing for me was to go to college for myself, for my family, for opportunities, for mentorship, for critical thinking. And I did that. And I feel like what the perception was then was very close to what the reality was, what it was for me, what I took away.
Mm-hmm.
Today, I think it's very different. The way that people talk about upper education is not the way that I did in 1995 when I was a sophomore in high school. And it's very, very far from what the reality is. And I think that there's a huge opportunity for education to kind of fill that gap with a story.
Let's talk a little more about this. There was less, what I'm hearing you say is the perception and reality was the same back 30 years ago, or pretty close to it. But now perception and reality are different. Why?
Mm-hmm. I'll take some stabs. I think one is become politicized, right? You have very, very strong, well-known political advocates, proponents criticizing upper education. Charlie Kirk, late Charlie Kirk being one, but not just on the right. In preparation for this, I was thinking about who are all the people on the left who criticize it. I could go through a list of those as well, but I think it's politicization on both right and left.
You're saying political entities lie. Is that what you're saying? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Politicals pull us further from the truth for clickbait, right? To get our attention. And that goes into the second item, which is social media. And social media tends to accentuate the bottom and the top of whatever is happening because that gets our attention. It gives us to stay on it, gives us the dopamine. And so either education is going to be the best or it's going to be the worst. And which one do you think people are going to click on?
Oh,
education's the worst.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why this is, but people tend to focus on the negative. From a psychology perspective, I would have to wonder if you focus on the negative, that makes your self-esteem get better because you're better than that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess to kind of continue with my third, and then maybe you have some ideas as well, Drumm. The third idea that I have around why there's a big gap between reality and perception is maybe because upper education is behind the times when it comes to storytelling or marketing, right? They were still printing catalogs of and sending it to seniors in high school. I don't know if they're still doing it today, but I think they probably were 4 years ago, right? When maybe they should have been embracing TikTok. Maybe they should have embraced YouTube. That's okay, right? Maybe we're a little bit behind the time, but education is full of brilliant people between the age of 18 all the way up to professors who are 80. You have 62 years of brilliance that you can catch up with what technology is giving us.
I think you're spot on with that last point. You've got tremendous amount of smarts, brilliance in education, multiple range. But who is your audience? Who really is the person that you're marketing to? I've had, it's a conundrum for most higher ed institutions and for me as well. Who is your customer? Is it the student that's coming in? Is it their parents? Or is it society? And in many respects, it's all three.
I agree. I think that you need to be nuanced in the way that you speak to each one of those audiences. That might mean different channels or it might mean different handles, right? So if we're going to talk about something, let's just say TikTok, for example. I like TikTok because it gives you feedback really quickly and you can publish as many clips as you want in a day and it doesn't hurt your reach. So you and I could put on 25 clips today, and we're going to know quickly which one is the best. There's a chance on TikTok that you have 3 different handles for 3 different audiences. One is for society at large that is not going to send their kid to college, nor are they going to college. So maybe it's my aunt and she's 55 years old. She's not going to send me to college. She's not going to college, but she impacts how society thinks, right? There might be a different channel aimed at me. I'm 45 years old. I have a 9-year-old. That 9-year-old, hopefully in 9 years, is going to be going to college, right? So how are you going to talk to me? Are you going to explain to there's value? Are you going to remind me what I got from my college and that's still there for my son? And there's probably extra things that are there for my son that I didn't have. Technology, right? I can remember my first computer in 1999. Can you imagine what my son could learn today? He could probably build a robot. He could definitely film a documentary. I didn't have that. I didn't have access to that. And then lastly, you're probably going to have a TikTok handle aimed at a 15-year-old to a 20-year-old who is going to be going to college soon, or they're in a community college and you need to explain to them, do not drop out. There's an opportunity for you here. It's not a title. It's income. It's thinking. It's network. It's community. So you might need to think about it in that way.
What I'm hearing you say is higher ed needs to be better at marketing and positioning themselves.
100%.
And that is a challenge because most higher ed folks in their faculty, and that's who I'm obviously most familiar with, have specialties. Some of them are marketing, but it's mostly theoretical. It's not the practical side of the house. So this is a muscle that they need to build.
Or just use one of their really smart freshmen in college, who know how to take your theory and put it into practice or execution in channels that you and I may not use.
Wait a minute.
The same framework that you and your listeners and I use as an older population who appreciates college, those frameworks will help for the younger person who needs to do the execution with new channels.
This is a brilliant, brilliant idea, but it also requires you to understand and actually tap into your freshmen. Normally, you're not doing, internships or externships as a freshman or whatever, but you've got to do something to be able to understand that demographic that's going to be coming in for the next 3 to 4 years, because your marketing materials, your admission materials, your enrollment materials need to reflect what that population wants and needs to hear.
Well, just to give an example of, kind of taking your idea over to something that you could actually do. When I went to college in August 1999, there are 2 things that I did that could easily be replaced with this storytelling by your college. The first thing I did is we had a 2-week kind of team building activity where they put me in groups of, I think, about 15 freshmen, and we could choose kayak, canoe, or hiking. And we went on this amazing experience to Upper New York, and we learned life skills, and we learned communication, and we learned some survival skills, right? And that was mandatory. That exact process could be turned into a 5-day sprint to film a documentary for the incoming freshman class, right? And you give them 5 different myths that exist out there right now around upper education, and you charge these students with the challenge of, in 5 days, film something between 10 and 30 minutes. We'll put editing software there for your AI. We'll put an editor we can hire as a freelancer from abroad, and you give them this content, you create the story, and you give them 5 myths. Combat one of these myths in your documentary. The second thing is I had a freshman seminar. You might have had a freshman seminar. I went to liberal arts college. We had a freshman seminar for the first 2 semesters where we met in a small room with a professor. I think my professor was economics. I didn't study economics. I studied Spanish and sociology. And that economics professor led us through books that I probably wouldn't have come across. Instead of semester 2, why don't they just have that group of us have a mastermind where we do a documentary? And maybe it's not a documentary. Maybe it's a story. Maybe it's a podcast. Maybe it's myself and 5 freshmen where we interview the faculty of everything that they've learned and pass those life lessons down to me as a freshman. We have to embrace storytelling. and change the new channels, embrace new channels. The framework that we get from our professors exists the same today as I think it did 35 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Interesting points. I just spoke with a president of Stevens Institute of Technology who has one of these mandatory courses. Every freshman goes through it. You develop a mentor relationship with that professor. And what these freshmen come out of this is life skills, how to navigate through the maze, which is higher education in many respects. We won't go into that maze, but it's there. It's giving them those skills that they need to be successful throughout their college and into life beyond graduation. I mean, they've got like a 96% placement of their graduates within 6 months. That's phenomenal.
Amazing. And is that story being told
Yes.
by the influencers, right?
It is.
Like that has to be out there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can have a high schooler or a junior in college tell the story instead of me and you, even more impactful.
Mm-hmm. So when we were talking the other day, we talked about the importance of dealing with the elephant in the room. What is the elephant in the room?
Yeah, this is a process that I have come up with, or a framework or a blueprint for how do I help my clients design a story that helps them achieve the goals of bridging the gap between perception and reality. And it's an acronym. It comes from CARE. I think I started off with CARE just because I started doing documentaries in the healthcare space. C being confront, A being amplify, R being reshape, and E being evergreen, or that's a marketing term for endure. And so confront the negative perception of what everyone talks about us when we're not there. So the elephant in the room is, we all know, as people, proponents of upper education, those of us who admire upper education, we all know what they're saying about us. But often when we do marketing, we avoid that topic. And that means that we talk about our beautiful campus. We talk about how many students enroll, right? We talk about our endowment. We talk about technology. But do we talk about the fact that some of those people visiting the college think that they might be able to replace upper education with AI? Are some of those students or parents of those students thinking, oh, is my son going to come out woke and political? Is my son going to come out or my daughter going to come out with $140,000 of debt, not be able to get a job? I think those are the three elephants in the room that every parent is thinking about when they're about to visit a college. So you have to confront that. That's part of the design of the story that you need to tell. Because if you don't tell it and you don't confront it, they're going to tell that story on Reddit, YouTube, Facebook groups, text threads.
Oh, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about woke, because depending on what state you're in, that is critical. You've got a new accreditor trying to get started down in the South. It's a consortium of multiple states and multiple state university systems. How would you deal with something like woke?
If I were in some type of association with other colleges, I would do a documentary to confront that. And we can talk about, if we were just a one-off college, how I would do that. But I think I'll start a little bit higher, partially because I just did a keynote about 2 months ago to an association of independent colleges about how a documentary could help them. I would confront the elephant in the room. So I would find out how people are talking about me in terms of woke on YouTube comments, YouTube videos, Reddit, Google, and so forth. And then I would determine what would be a story, not data. What is a story that is closer to the reality that I can show, not tell? Oftentimes, average marketers, we tell with data. Good marketers show, and the showing speaks for itself, and the rest, the audience, can fill that in with data. So from showing point of view, if I were an association, I would find a very stark example of somebody who is coming into college, an 18 or a 19-year-old who comes in very conservative. Myself, for example, I came into college very conservative in 1999. and I studied sociology and I didn't come out woke, I would be an example, right? So film some version of an 18-year-old who comes in, studies these supposedly woke degrees, and show the relationship that they create with their professors that become their friends and their mentors. I worked with my first professor out of college. It was my very first job doing surveys. And all of my sociology professors helped me get into my master's, my PhD, and show that story and then show that contrast of like this young 18-year-old who might look like Charlie Kirk, who becomes friends with somebody who might look like Gavin Newsom, but in the college. And these people become friends and their ideas don't change. What they change is the way that they talk to each other. They become friends. That story, I would watch that today.
That is such a critical point to make, is getting the friendship. When I think back, and I jokingly say I didn't have an education, I had technical training because I went to the Naval Academy. I majored in physics. I flew airplanes when I got out. So very highly technical and very conservative, both from a family perspective as well as my education. When I think about those kind of things, and I think back to the academy, yeah, I think of my classmates and things like that. But I think about my professor, Herr Dr. Professor Kalam. He was German descent, heavy German accent. He got his doctorate and taught at Harvard for many years, so he had the Boston accent overlaid into it. I can remember having conversations with him in class as a group. That's who I think about. And like you, it's not you're being woke or whatever. It's building that friendship and that relationship. I remember my first, quote, mentor, my faculty advisor. Those are the things that we think about. It's not about going and becoming woke. I think, it's not important what I think about that. But to your point, it's the relationships. And you can't do that through AI.
No, you're not going to be able to. Going to your example, I just got back from visiting Boston this summer for about 2 weeks. I went with my wife and my son. And my wife let me split off from the two of them for 3 days. And I went back to the campus where I went to college in Boston. And the very first thing that I did is I went and looked up my professors. And I went and had lunch and coffee with them and walked around the North Shore. And these are all my sociology professors. And it's that relationship. The ChatGPT and Gronk and Perplexity, all of those are not going to be able to replace what Dr. Johnson is for me and how he's formed me. And is that story getting out? I don't think so. Not as much as it should.
Mm-hmm. It's really important that these stories come out. And I think your point, the associations, this is where a lot of these come out. But as individuals, we can relate these stories as well. Your expertise is in the art of communicating difficult subjects and in difficult times. So let's take a stab at reframing the public narrative about higher education to tell a more complete truth. For example, cost of higher ed. Right now, the narrative is out there. It's not worth the money. You can get as high a salary, et cetera, starting out. And then the counter argument is, but over the lifetime of your earnings, you're going to earn 3 to 4 times more with a college degree than you won't. All of those are valid stories. How do you deal with this? Or how would you deal with this?
So I haven't spent too much thinking on this, but off the cuff, I would probably approach it not from the college point of view. I would approach it from what is being left out there and being unused. I think the slap in the face to me as a viewer of, hey, you think nobody's given you a chance. You complain that you can't afford college. Let me show you the amount of scholarships that go unused. Let me show you how much tradesmen are making right now and what are the unique degrees that exist in upper education that are giving amazing salaries. So instead of, in my opinion, I think I changed 4 majors my freshman year in college. And I don't even know if I studied any of the classes that I declared myself as a major. So I come from the thinking that most 18-year-olds don't know what they want to do. They follow what's trending. So if I told a story that showed me where I'm going to make money, where I'm going to be fulfilled, what's going to be rewarding, then you insert the university. The university is not the protagonist in this story. It is the student, and it's the offering that's going to get their attention. And the college is the vehicle to get them, to turn them into the hero or to help them find success.
Interesting. Let's go a little deeper on that.
Okay.
We talked earlier about the elephant in the room, searching through Reddit, YouTube, TikTok, et cetera, to find out, then building the message. You just talked about what the message is. How do you rewrite the story that is out there about the cost of higher education?
Yeah, so I'll continue with the same example around costs. So going back to the kind of the acronym with C being confront, I would probably spend a couple hours going through all of the Reddit threads, communities that have the most amount of negativity related to upper education cost. And then I would do the exact same thing through all of the other channels. I would pull those together and I would start to decide what are the key topics or the key themes here. And then I would write what is the exact opposite of that in terms of a hypothesis, making sure it's accurate. So college is overpriced. I'm going to spend $140,000 for 4 years and I'm not going to have a job afterwards. Well, then I would just write the opposite. College isn't $140,000. 60% of kids have access to 30% of scholarship relief, or 90% of kids that have higher than a B- average in high school get this amount of support type of thing. And then I would walk it through where are the success stories that you will see because of college. Because I don't know you that well, and I obviously know my story well, I'll give you my example. I walked out of college and I made $8,000 as a social worker. I made $8,000 more than my supervisor because I spoke Spanish. Nobody's telling you that, right? Like, I didn't study social work. I studied Spanish on the side. And I made more than my supervisor because of what college gave me, right? I today am a marketer. I would attribute 75% of what I do well as a marketer because the way they taught me to think like a sociologist, right? 25% I'll give it to my mom and my dad. They taught me to be kind, to think about psychology, to be empathetic. That gives me a good marketing foundation. But the critical thinking, right? The exact same framework that I'm developing right now, that came from Dr. Johnson, Dr. Holcomb, Dr. J. Anthony Lloyd. Those are the three people I spent the most time with in college. So you take the negativity that you see and you pull a story to bring out the complete opposite.
That makes perfect sense. And just kind of doubling back to what we said earlier, you've got three different audiences that you're doing this for. Is this all one, quote, documentary or, short film, or is this multiple?
I think this is probably the most important thing that we're talking about in this entire conversation, because I'll use the terminology in marketing and then I'll bring it down to layman's, because probably 5% or 15% of your audience works in marketing. I think of this not as a documentary. I think of this as an entire evergreen campaign for you to bring new audiences in to look at your goals and move them down what we call funnel. In marketing, we have what's called a top of funnel, which is awareness, and then you bring them down to bottom of funnel, which is what you want them to do that is going to be a solution to the pain that they have and achieve the goals that you have. So you have this core piece of content, which is a documentary, which is expressing the reality that is not out there. That could live in a bubble and no one sees it. Now, my first documentary, I got it onto every smart television, Apple and Samsung and Hulu, but you can't guarantee that's going to be the case. So let's assume that's not the case. You have this documentary. Now you take that documentary and you turn it into short form content, 30-second, 60-second, 90-second clips. And those go to your social media channels, whether they're paid, like Meta ads, or they're organic. I would do organic, and I would do YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and all of that. And that is where you're going to have different audiences. And that's where you're going to bring in people to see it, because they're going to see the clickbait information. And that is where you have one aimed at my aunt who is not sending her kid to college. She didn't have a kid. You have one aimed at at me because I'm sending my kid to college. And then you have one aimed at a high schooler. And I would just have your students create that content. And I would separate it. I would say, hey, guys, we have 3 handles in TikTok this year. We've developed a documentary that was filmed last year by the freshmen. Now they're sophomores. They filmed it. Now you as freshmen, you guys are going to grow these, and you're going to get the information out there.
Yeah.
I think can't you just imagine every freshman in college being just thrilled to use a story, promote something that they have decided to do, and learn from the algorithm? This education is going to serve them when they get their next job in 3 years.
Oh, absolutely. And I can even see this going a step further than that, as each school within a university or a college within a university, for your majors, somebody wants to be an engineering major. So you have someone who is a student be your, subject in this, talking about that. So where that people relate. I know we used to have a website that would have multiple different testimonial stories, different people, men, women, people of color, etc. And people will normally click on the person that they identify with. So if you've got that story, that's a wonderful way of doing it.
Yeah. I want to give a concrete example that I think will help everyone visualize this in practice. So I had a call this morning with my marketing team, and we've done 5 documentaries in the nursing home space. And I said, hey, we have a call this week where we need to come up with marketing campaigns for our partners aimed at 2 different audiences with the same content that we've already developed. And my team said to me, what do you mean? How can one clip go for 2 different audiences? I said, it's with the caption and it's with your call to action. So one of the documentaries that I filmed a year ago shows 2 sisters who, before they started working in nursing home and long-term care, they both worked at Subway. And the story of this documentary is these young girls are like 25 years old who found a place in life that's so fulfilling that they will never, ever leave long-term care. And in the meeting, we said, how would we use this for 2 different audiences? I said, this is what it looks like. One clip is aimed at a 15 to 19-year-old, and it says, you don't want to throw money at college. You're afraid you don't know what to do. You don't have a good community college close by. Consider becoming a CNA today and be as happy as these 2 girls who worked in Subway. Don't go to Subway like them. Reach out to your local nursing home. They'll pay for your education today. Same clip. Now let's aim it at somebody who is not a CNA. Let's aim it at Drumm, or let's aim it at Peter. And they're going to show it to us on TikTok. The exact same clip. It shows these 2 girls. The caption says, do you know somebody who's young and has a big heart? Watch this. They
Brilliant.
show it to me and you. You and I are like, whoa, those people are going to take care of us. You and I are going to be in a nursing home in the next 30 years or 40 years. And they say, do you know a Mary and a Katie in your life? Tag them today so they know that they can have a career. The same clip, 2 different audiences. You're not paying twice the price. You're using the same thing, and you're hitting Drumm and Peter in one, and the other one you're hitting a high schooler who wants to become a CNA.
Brilliant. I'm going to double back just a bit. You talked about the marketing funnel. Enrollment has the same thing. There's an enrollment funnel from inquiry down to admissions.
Yep.
Same type of thing. And more and more institutions are using AI, top of funnel, more personal touch down at the bottom of the funnel, which is a really smart idea. Way to go. But what if you were able to get your message out via a 2-minute clip, via TikTok, via whatever, touting your school, touting the affordability, touting the education, touting the relationships. To me, that's brilliant.
I would actually do it. So going back to your question, like you could do it with an engineer, you could do it with an architect. I would test having different days where different degrees run your social media with the content that you've already created in the documentary. So one of the things that I've noticed that works really well in social media is not being the smartest person in the room. So when I have done clips that have a caption right on it, before you click on it, says, I had no idea, ... People click on it because people want to know the surprise. So instead of me coming and telling you why you should go to college, me coming and saying, hey, 6 months ago, I didn't know this. You and I are almost in the same place. Now I'm going to show you what I learned, not tell you what I learned. So we're going to learn it together. And you have an engineer who's 20 years old who said, I had no idea when I applied to X college to become an engineer that engineers are needed in every aspect of life. I've already had X company reach out to me because they need an engineer in video games or cybersecurity, or introduce these concepts to these 19-year-olds who might be thinking, I don't need to go to college. Everything that I want access to, I can. Well, you're not going to have access to these businesses that are recruiting engineers because they need someone who thinks like that.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Before we wrap up, there was one thing that you mentioned to me that really struck me when we spoke last week. If you don't write the story, they're going to write it for you. You're just not aware of it.
Yep. I think that this is probably the part that hurts the most, right? Those of us who have our causes in life, you know, if you're passionate about the unhomed or the homeless, I worked in the HIV/AIDS population. My brother has a terminal disease. Whatever your passion is, you start to think about how far the perception is away from the reality that you know. And you know somebody else is writing that book. You, as a marketer, every single day when you go out and try and talk people to become a Boy Scout or go to church or be against hate language, you are a marketer and you're trying to write the book for the cause that you're passionate about. Mm-hmm. And colleges, upper education, universities, nursing homes, they have to write the book. Otherwise, on Reddit and YouTube and in our private conversations, and you and I are taking a road trip next time to Texas, you and I repeat what we have heard instead of the truth. And if you and I have watched my Octopus Professor documentary, you and I are going to be informed, and you and I are going to have a completely different conversation about octopus today. If you and I watch the Ken Burns documentary about baseball, you and I are going to have a completely different conversation about baseball, because they went out and wrote this real story instead of waiting for everyone else to do it. Be your own author.
Such a critical point. And we see that over and over in politics, in education, whatever, is people are going out and writing a story that suits their own desires, suits their own political bent, etc., and it may or may not be the truth.
Yeah. May I give another example that I think everyone will understand, which is Drive to Survive Formula One on Netflix. 5 years ago, Formula One was not popular in the United States. Netflix took Formula One, made a dramatic series out of it, and now they grew the population, and it's $1 billion industry that they brought in the United States. And not only are men watching it, women watch it. Netflix wrote the book for Formula One. You can do the same thing.
Absolutely. You know, folks at ACE, you know, folks at AACNU, folks at CHIA, we can be doing far more in writing that narrative versus just trying to react to it. At individual colleges, we can do the same thing for our folks as well. So, Peter, this has been fascinating. I thoroughly enjoy these kind of conversations where we're getting in theoretical and bringing them down, as we always do. 3 takeaways for university presidents and boards. What can you do about combating these false narratives that are out there?
Talk about the elephant in the room, number one. Number two, talk about it through a story. So show, don't tell. And lastly, eat that elephant one bite at a time. You can start off tomorrow with your cell phone. You can start off tomorrow with an intern coming in, one day at a time, one bite at a time.
And like we said earlier, if you don't write the story, somebody else is going to write it for you, and you may not like what that story is. So what's next for you?
Tomorrow, my TV production company and crew and my documentary crew are flying in from South America. 4 people. They've filmed 10 years of television with me and all my documentaries, and we are filming 3 documentaries in the next 4 weeks. We're doing one about a bank, we're doing one about a hippo, and then we're doing one about a nursing home in Texas.
Wow. You're going to be a little busy for the next 4 weeks, I guess.
Yep, I'll see you in December.
Very good. Well, Peter, thank you so much. I would love to have you back in 6 months or so and talk about what you've seen in the higher education industry. Can we do that?
Please, I'd be honored.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for being on this show. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening today, and a special thank you to my guest, Peter Murphy Lewis. Peter, I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I look forward to the next time we get to have a good conversation like we did today. To my listeners, thanks again for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you next week.
Changing Higher Ed is a production of The Change Leader, a consultancy committed to transforming higher ed institutions. Find more information about this topic, along with show notes on this episode at changinghighered.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the show, and we would also value your honest rating and review. Email any questions, comments, or recommendations for topics or guests to podcast@changinghighered.com. Changing Higher Ed is produced and hosted by Dr. Drumm McNaughton, post-production by David L. White.